Hey folks, everything new under the sun. Just thought I'd start another live stream here and cover off what I basically covered in the prior two videos. I've had trouble with audio. Seems like after a while the computer just needs to be restarted, and it causes me to have to redo stuff, and that's unfortunate. I don't really have an indication. Usually I check the videos before they upload to see if there's any trouble, but in this case, the last two I didn't, and that just gets you. So hello to everybody who can come on live and meet with me. Christ alone is there. Welcome. And Pete, I see you. Brian, sounds good. Thank you very much. And Lisa's there. Lisa Costello, welcome, welcome. Well, as I'll go ahead and start. People can watch this after. I think the peak viewing time on my channel is, I think 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock or something. So, anyways, interesting times on the markets of late. This is CNBC, and the market was down. Was it 500 points yesterday at a time, and it has come up significantly. Dow claws back 800-point loss. And there's some significant people or organizations apparently selling puts there to bring up the markets, but lots of trouble. And it's something to watch for. And the reason that is, hello Greg, hello Kelly, I see you on there. The reason that you need to watch this, and we don't know exactly when anything big is going to occur, but it's spoken of in the Bible. So in Revelation 6, we see the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You see the seven seals of Revelation. And Revelation 5 to 6 seems to speak to some sort of economic collapse, famine, inflation, i.e. the price of things increases, a measure of wheat for a penny, which translates to you're going to have to work a full day's work just to pay for one meal. That's what the end effect of the verses related to that are. And so there will come a time when money still works. You can still get food, but it's going to cost you a lot. It's going to cost you a lot more than, say, $1.50 a loaf or $2 a loaf, whatever it costs you now for a loaf of bread. It's going to cost you a day's labor to get that. But the oil and the wine are spared, which has been an interesting thing of a conversation around Bible prophecy watchers, people following eschatology, and what does that mean that the oil and wine are spared, and some interesting thoughts there. But it does speak to some sort of economic trouble. Now, as we look at the timeline of the return of the Lord, there is a period, I believe, just prior to the 7-year period starting, where things are going to get really hard. We're going to get to the precipice of war, the edge of war, the brink of war. Is that occurring right now? I'm thinking of Russia, Ukraine. Certainly a lot of hysteria around it. Certainly a lot of mainstream media trying to make you think there's something going on there. Meanwhile, the Pentagon came out and said, Russia isn't close to invading Ukraine. Then you have got guys like Boris Johnson saying, Russia could invade and take over the city, Kiev in Ukraine, and it would be a bloody situation. And so we have these, effectively, these warmongers. Like, when do leaders ever start saying things like that? And in a sort of a way, giving a green light. Now, Biden, a couple of days ago at a press conference, apparently gave a somewhat of a green light for Russia to go and take us a little slice of Ukraine. Now that was walked back by the various politicians, Biden, his handlers, etc. But you have these politicians saying what would otherwise be crazy things. You don't suggest or suggest that something's going to happen like that. So there's a narrative there. And there's countries coming out and saying, you know what, we're not going to be a part of this. Germany, for example, they don't want to be a part of a war with Russia, so they're not allowing shipments of weapons, for example, go through their airspace. I forget what the other country was. I did share the article this morning but there's another country that says, you know what, the governments of the U.S. and UK, they're just making a big deal out of this. They're stirring up trouble, and we will have no part of it. And we're not going to send our troops. Now, when you're a member of NATO, and you say you know we're not going to support NATO, that's bad. That means NATO itself is crumbling, which would then give Putin more interest. Now, no doubt, or more reason to go against NATO and stand up. Now, no doubt, Putin has some of his own aspirations. He wants to create the USSR again, the motherland, if you will. So he's not an angel by any stretch, but certainly it seems like Western powers are making a much bigger deal of it. And when all else fails, they take you to war, and this is what's been said in the past. And that's true. When the economy's in trouble, what's an easy distraction? Well, war. If your political situation is in trouble, like Biden, I don't know if his ratings are lower than Trump's now, but his ratings related to how good he's doing and how much people like him, they are very, very low, if not lower than Trump. Then they're very, very close to Trump at this point. And his political career is failing. There's even Democrats that are giving up on Biden. And so what does Biden want to do? Well, he wants to distract you. What does Biden do? He points over there and he says, look over there. There's something going on over there. Pay attention to that. Don't pay attention to what's happening in the U.S., in Canada. Don't pay attention to what's happening in politics or in the economy. Don't pay attention that a recession is coming, and maybe even worse. Don't pay attention to the stock market. Don't pay attention to various mandates and all these other things we're pushing through. Pay attention to this war over there. We're making a big deal of it. We're getting all the mainstream media to push this thing. And you need to be very careful about what you believe. Now, I'm not saying go and read alternative media sites as well, or only, and believe them 100%. Take everything with a grain of salt. Mainstream and alternative media. You got to kind of put them together, and likely somewhere in the middle, maybe more over to the side of the alternative media, but somewhere in the middle is the truth in all those things. And so don't necessarily take it for granted that it's all Russia's fault. So, stock market's coming back up. Last couple of years, we've had some significant trouble on the stock market, and there was an article in Zero Hedge that suggested if NASDAQ went below 14,000, that as they said, all hell would break loose, according to their words. And it is below 14,000 now. This is the 1 year chart. You can see where it is now. A significant fall from the peaks over the last number of months. The other thing to look at is you go to the 5 year and look at the stock market. Up, 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 up. This is the same way it looks for the Dow Jones. Let's go over to the Dow Jones and take a look at the chart for that. 5 year, look at this, up, 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 up. If we go to all, now it only goes back to 1981 or whatever the year is. All goes back to 1980. It'd be interesting to see it go back to 1929 and see what that looked like. But you can look at the chart; it just goes up and up and up. It's hardly coming down. And is it overblown? Absolutely. Is it overbought? Very likely. Does it need to correct? Some people think it's going to correct about 50%. Let's take a look at this article. So this is what I went through this morning. We are being warned that a horrifying stock market crash, which could wipe out trillions, has now begun. And this is something, granted, we have been talking about for years, ever since 2008 and even beyond prior to that, because the economic conditions were in such a place that people were in such debt, countries were in such debt, and they continued to print money out of thin air, that this can't continue forever. This whole stock market thing, stock markets do not continue up forever. At some point, it's got to come back down. There's got to be a fair market value in there somewhere, wherever that is, high or low. But it's got to even out and come back at some point. What would our country look like if an epic stock market crash suddenly wiped out $35 trillion in financial wealth? You may not want to think about something so horrible, but we are being warned it could happen soon. Stock prices have been falling for 3 weeks now, and the last week was the worst week for U.S. stocks. Now, this is a couple days out of date. This is from the 23rd. At this point, the NASDAQ is off to its worst beginning to a year in decades. Bank of America warned that all hell breaks loose if NASDAQ closes below 14,000, and that's exactly where they are. If we go over, look at the NASDAQ, where it was over 14, I think it was this morning, and it's went down again. I wonder if I can pull up the, let's look at the 5-day here. Let's see, 24th, 14,000. So there's 14,000 right there, 14,000 right there. So it's been down around there, underneath 14,000 for a couple of days now. And that apparently is a significant situation. So we're talking about a super bubble, and that's what they're describing it as. Jeremy Grantham, the famed investor who for decades has been calling market bubbles, said the historic collapse in stocks he predicted a year ago is underway, and even intervention by the Federal Reserve can't prevent an eventual plunge of almost 50%. Now, go read your history. Go find out what happened in 1929. The stock markets went up and up and up and up. Look at that hockey stick. NASDAQ. Stock markets went up and up and up, and stock markets can't continue up forever. At some point, that bubble has to burst. And where's it going to come back down to? Somewhere around here? I don't know. It seems fairly level around there. Of course, lots of money printing in there, but there is fair value in there somewhere. Generally speaking, as it goes for the market. And so where's it going to bounce down to? And that's really the big question. They're suggesting a 50% drop. The co-founder of Boston Asset GMO describes the U.S. stocks as being in a super bubble, only the fourth in the century, and just as they did in the crash of 1929, the dot-com bust of 2000, and the financial crisis of 2008. He's certain this bubble will burst as well. So just like in all those times past, we've lived through those, you and I don't think there's anybody less than 10 years old watching me today, or 11, whatever, 12 years. And so we've all seen this. We've seen these significant downfalls. And in 2008, they started printing money like crazy. And they have no more ammo. The Federal Reserve has threatened to raise rates, but they didn't even raise them yet. And the markets are already having trouble because they don't like that the government is going to raise rates. That means, if they do, that means there has to be a haircut on the stock market. Why? Because the cost of borrowing is increasing. They can't play with as much free money anymore. Still lots of free money, but there won't be as much of it. And so this is the problem. He noted U.S. stocks experienced two such super bubbles before 1929. A market fall that led to the Great Depression, and I think it's going to be worse than that. Why? Well, because in 1929, people still had some idea as to how to grow food, vegetables, keep a garden, keep pigs and livestock and chickens and all these things. They had an idea how to do that, and not as many were in big cities. So the more that were out in the sticks in the country had more resources, the ability to kind of work and make, live off the land a little bit more. We are in a completely different situation. If people don't have money to pay for their cell phones, all communication is going to be lost. When's the last time you spoke to your neighbor, right? So there's a whole communication thing that will go down if people can't afford to pay for cell phones, and what other services will fall apart when bills are not paid. And this is significant. So 1929, the Great Depression, again in 2000, and the super bubble in 2006, and the 1989 Japanese stock market and housing markets were both bubbles. All five of these super bubbles corrected all the way back to the trend with much greater and longer pain than average. So what I suspect is going to happen is that we'll get to the precipice. We'll get to the brink of economic collapse. We'll get to the precipice and brink and the edge of world war. And then there will be a world leader who comes along. See this, economic collapse, what has to come before the Antichrist? I believe social collapse, civil unrest, Antichrist, and a peace deal. And because the Antichrist is going to come along and say, look, I can fix this economy. I can resolve this war, this thing with Russia. I can resolve this thing with China and Taiwan. I'm going to fix it all. And you know how we're going to fix it? We're going to create a peace deal in the Middle East, because if you create peace between the Israelis and the Palestinians, everybody knows, quote unquote, that you basically solve world peace if you solve the Middle East, the Israeli, Iran, and then the Palestinian issue. And, apparently it all comes from them. They're all the reason for the war in the world. So that's what this world leader is going to do. And that's why I believe we get to the brink of all these things. And then during the first 3.5 years, that's when the four horsemen of the apocalypse ride. I believe that's when the actual trouble, the real trouble, comes down, if you will, going up to the seals of Revelation. So the article does go on. It says, for the first time in the U.S., we have simultaneous bubbles across all major classes, said Grantham, co-founder. He estimated wealth losses could total $35 trillion in the U.S. should valuations across market asset classes return 2/3 of the way to historical norms. If this actually happens, the writer says, it will result in economic horror show that will be unlike anything you've ever seen before. So it's something to be concerned about. It's something to be aware of as it relates to the last days, the times that we're in. Just like Joseph in Egypt, there were 7 good years and 7 bad years. I believe we're at the very, very end of the 7 good years. And we know that the 7 bad years are coming, the tribulation and the great tribulation, the persecution of man by mankind, and the wrath of God, which is going to fall upon the earth. And so get prepared now, just like Joseph did. Joseph was a prepper. If you want to use that term, if you want to call him that, you want to call yourselves that, that's fine. That's exactly what Joseph was. Now, he had a dream that there would be 7 good years and 7 bad years. And so, what did he do in Egypt? As second in command, he stored up great grain houses full of food that would last them through the 7 bad years of famine and economic hardship. Likewise, you should be prepared. I'm not saying put all your effort into storing up treasures on earth, because the Bible says to store up treasures in heaven that will not rust or decay or go moldy or become worthless. But you need to have your heart right with the Lord Jesus Christ, and you need to get people saved and into heaven, because that's the eternal reward, and that's the things that last eternally. But on this earth, God expects us to be wise and use our brains for the things that are coming upon the world. And so that was kind of the message. Be prepared. And there's several prepper channels, and you can check those out, and they're very interesting. I think a lot of them are Seventh-day Adventists and Mormons. I think Mormons are a big part of the prepper community, the long food storage community. I don't know if they're saved or not. That would be an interesting thing to look into to find out if those guys are saved through the blood of Jesus Christ. But they at least have good information about being prepared, because it may not be a nuclear weapon. There may just be a storm come through, on a nor'easter for the East Coast. Maybe hurricanes, tornadoes go through. There may be some flooding, natural disasters. You just need to be ready for these things. I'm just going to read some comments here. Let's see. I'm sure Ukrainians have a little something on Biden through Hunter. Yeah, there's a lot of, and that's not even new news. A lot of talking and at high levels, communication at high levels through Biden, through Hunter Biden rather. And have they prosecuted that? Have they really looked into that? Not very much. Shemitah ends in September this year. This is the point of a major stock market collapse in past years. Collapses in past years. Yeah, it's a high watch time for a lot of things. The rapture, one of the biggest things to watch for. But yes, the Shemitah year started September last year, goes through September this year. And anytime now, I'm kind of expecting the start of the 7-year period. We'll see. No one knows exactly when it's going to happen. Maybe we have another 10 years. But you'll notice the news in this world, the way the world is going, doesn't seem like we have that much time. Ozzy Mom says, do you think that means that the rich won't be affected but spared? Well, the rich, and that's a great question. The rich are going to ride it out for a period of time. But at some point, they too need truckers. Now, I don't know if you've heard heard of the convoy to Ottawa. All the truckers are getting together in Canada, and actually a lot of Americans too are riding to protest mandates for the jab for all truckers coming and going to the U.S. and the same rule is falling down in the U.S. But even those rich people, they buy off Amazon and they buy from various places. They too need stuff trucked and shipped to them. So they're going to be affected. They may have some bunkers with 3 years worth of food. But if they're missing anything, if they forgot about something, they're going to be in the same situation you are. And by the way, they are few. And so if the millions of people in inner cities start going out to the suburbs and to the country to look for food, even the rich people won't be able to protect themselves at some point. So I don't know if it's going to get that bad. I suspect that at some point it will during the first 3.5 years. But they will be sheltered, at least with their wealth, for a short period. But we know, of course, in the last days that ultimately they will throw their silver and gold into the streets, because you can't eat silver and gold. You can't eat, batteries and solar panels and bug out vehicles and all these, flashlights and all these other things. You can't eat that stuff. In those days, the most important thing is going to be food for many people. Rich says, Shemitah, do you believe another lockdown is coming? Well, where I am, we are effectively in lockdown. Now, not strict lockdown like it was in March of last year, but we're very limited in terms of, we can only meet with 2 other people, technically, according to the rules. We're allowed to travel, but they highly discourage it, and we're not supposed to. We're basically supposed to stay in our houses to limit the spread of Omicron. That being said, they're trying not to overrun the hospitals, and I understand that piece, but I don't understand why they aren't putting resources into field hospitals. But I think Omicron is effectively the end of this pandemic. We'll see how it goes, and I think, at least where I am, our leaders are rational, unlike our national government, which isn't quite rational in very many cases. Greg says, I think we'll all be impacted. I don't know if moving to cash-based investments would make a difference, but it might be safer than staying in the market. I wouldn't be in the market myself unless I had cash that I was willing to lose. I would be in hard assets. I would, pay off your house so that you can have that as an asset. Some people buy art. Gold and silver, for example, is a hard asset. It's always going to be worth something until the very, very last of the last days. And so come economic trouble, you're going to be able to do something with that. People recognize gold and silver. You may not get as much for it as you think, but you may be able to trade it for a little bit of food. Probably the most important thing is to get a couple shovels and get some seeds. And because when hard times come, what do people really need? What do they get desperate for? They don't get desperate for Lamborghinis and expensive Rolex watches. They get desperate for food, the basics, eggs, maybe not bacon. Bacon's a bit of a luxury, but vegetables, just flour, just plain stuff. And so if you have a little bit of that extra to trade, it could be useful. Again, at some point, none of it's going to be useful to you. When the wrath of God comes, there's not going to be anything you can do to escape the judgment. But up until then, there will be things that, if you've prepared for it, and it's coming, because the Bible said this stuff is coming. That's why you're looking at the 7 seals of Revelation. Go read the verses. They describe to you what the end of the world will look like and what sorts of things to expect. And I think this is the ramp up and the birth pains into these, the kind of the slide and the conditioning moving into these things. So think of it as a nudge on your shoulder from the Lord, saying, look, you see the shortages now, and there will be more shortages due to this convoy as well. That's going to Ottawa, and many of our grocery stores, even before the convoy, were already having empty shelves, and there's news all over the U.S. of empty shelves. And you need to be prepared for those empty shelves and be able to get through it. And so at the end of the day, the expensive assets won't matter so much. People at some point won't even worry about houses and roofs over their heads because they're going to be starving. And so food at the end of the day, it really is one of the most valuable things, of course. Rich Howell says, crypto is a sign. Crypto, I have a little bit of crypto, and there was a comment there about crypto. What was the comment? I think, do I think it's Mark of the Beast? I don't think crypto is Mark of the Beast. It doesn't fit Mark of the Beast. It could be the back end of Mark of the Beast. That technology could be the technology used in Mark of the Beast, but ultimately, Mark of the Beast is a number on your right hand or your forehead, whether it be a computer chip or whatever, a mark on your right hand or in your forehead. And it also requires that you pledge allegiance to the Antichrist. And so there's extra things that come along with it. So I don't believe we've seen that yet. Is it evil? Is it Antichrist to have crypto? I don't believe so at this point. Certainly not. Bitcoin is not the Antichrist, and Litecoin is not the Antichrist. I don't like it as much because it goes up and down with the markets. It's not a kind of a true hedge against markets. Gold and silver should be, but because gold and silver is traded on the markets, it also goes up and down with the markets a little bit as well. But it is over year, I think, more stable. A hard asset, something you can tangibly hold in your hand. So if internet communications are cut, if you can't go anywhere, you have something in your hand, on your person, or in your location that you can trade, you can barter, you can build with, you can eat, whatever it may be. Hard assets are always a safer bet, although you don't get the same return on investment necessarily over time as you might on crypto. You might win big on crypto, or you might lose big. Gold and silver or other hard assets like a shovel, they're not gonna appreciate a lot. But boy, when you need them, you need them. And when you need it, it needs to be on hand. Let's see. We all got to take the mark. It's going to be very hard not to accept the mark. It's going to be Vax Pass times 10 in terms of the amount of pressure on everybody to take it. They're going to say, look, what we did in the pandemic, this is far worse. This is far worse coming upon society. And if you don't get it, you hate your neighbor. You don't love your neighbor. You're not a good Christian if you don't do this. They're already saying that about the current pandemic, but it's going to be that times 10. Jesus is the bread of life. Yes, ultimately, for our eternal souls, we need Jesus. And that is really the most important thing. Thank you, Christside Reptibles. Christside Reptibles. Interesting name. Reptibles, Last Day Soldiers. Let's see. I mean, spare the oil and the wine. What comment do you think that means? The rich won't be affected, but spared. Oil and the wine. That's, well, I hadn't thought about that. If there's symbology there. Likely there is, and maybe that's, maybe I should do a video about that. Klaus Schwab says XRP. Yeah, XRP, I think, was originally built as cryptocurrency that the federal governments were going to use. I had some of it at some point because, I was betting on effectively that the governments at the end of the day will take control of everything and outlaw Bitcoin and Litecoin. I think that's still the case. I think the government at the end of the day will outlaw all these other ones, and they will bring in their own, whether it's XRP or something else. So it's like betting. It's like putting your money on the banks in the stock market. Well, the banks are always going to win every situation. So if you invest in them, you'll know that there's no way a bank can, effectively decrease in value, generally speaking. So it's a good investment from that point of view. So, anyways, investments, not my forte for sure. But interesting, yeah. And I don't think cryptocurrencies currently are the mark of the beast. All right, folks. Well, I need to get going here, but I did want to follow up and get a video here that you could actually hear me speaking. And thanks for the live comments. Always fun to do a live comment and do a bit of a question answer there. And Let me know what things you want me to talk about, and maybe I'll do some videos on those. You can leave them in the comments, and I'll read the comments there. Very good. Thanks, folks, for watching, and make sure you know the Lord Jesus Christ is your personal Savior. He died and rose again about 2,000 years ago for my sin and your sin. He's coming soon, and he's coming to deal with the sin in the world. He's bringing justice, and he's bringing the wrath on all the sinners and the evil in the world. But before that, I believe there's going to be a lot of persecution, a lot of trouble. Why? One reason is because, well, Satan's bringing upon the world. He thinks he's winning. The second reason is that the Lord is going to use it to make sure you're off the fence, that you're for him or against him. He's not going to let anybody go to hell who hasn't chosen to go to hell. He's not going to let anybody go to heaven who does not want to be where God is, who does not want to be does not want God to be part of his life or her life. If they choose not to be with God, then God's going to say, yeah, fine, you don't need to be with me. So you're going into this other place, and it's called hell. It's everything I am not. You won't like it, but that's what many people are choosing. So to get off the fence effectively. Folks, I'll leave it there. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.